The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. We don't have to go too deep into it.
President Trump issues a direct threat to Iran with American forces in the area. Just how close is the United States to actively going to war with the Islamic regime? And the fate of the National Guard in Los Angeles rests in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals while the LA mayor makes a decision on the imposed curfew. And later, the fate of TikTok up in the air again, what the president will do as the latest sale deadline approaches. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, breaking news tonight, we are hearing reports that President Donald Trump is expected to address the nation with an urgent message sometime tonight. It could happen at any moment. The president held a meeting with his national security team today, and speculation continues that the U.S. will actively join Israel in their war against Iran. We are monitoring it all. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. has assets in place to strike Iran if called upon. But for now, U.S. forces remain in a defensive posture. With more on how we got to this point, national correspondent Matt Galka reports from Washington.
President Trump focused multiple posts from his Truth Social account on the intensifying war with Israel and Iran. His posts also hinted at more U.S. involvement as he gathered with his team in the Situation Room. "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran" was part of Trump's first post addressing the situation after he abruptly left the G7 meetings in Canada to head back to Washington. His next was a threat to Iran's supreme leader, saying the U.S. knows exactly where he is, but we are not going to take him out, kill, at least not for now, before saying not to target civilians or American assets. He then called for unconditional surrender. Trump told reporters on the way back to D.C. he wasn't looking for a ceasefire deal, while he's seemingly at a crossroads between diplomacy and military action.
A real end, not a ceasefire, an end.
So something that will be permanent.
Yeah, or giving up entirely.
Israel believes Iran was close to having a nuclear weapon and launched bombing raids targeting nuclear facilities, with Iran firing back. U.S. intelligence believed Iran was still years away from a weapon despite enriching uranium just below weapons-grade levels. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard backed up that assessment to Congress in late March.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
The U.S. has provided defensive support to Israel so far, but more resources are on the way to the Middle East, including aircraft carriers and fighter jets, as the White House weighs whether or not to get more involved in the conflict.
I can't speak to intelligence assessments, what may or may not have changed, or to the fact that it is President Trump and his team who are seeing things that matter when it comes to the decision-making. And I think that that's what's happened here.
Axios reports that Israel believes Trump will bring the U.S. into the war in the coming days in order to help bomb Iran's Fordo underground uranium enrichment facility located deep in one of the country's mountains. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Also breaking at this hour, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has been rushed by ambulance to a Washington, D.C. hospital following an allergic reaction. A DHS spokesperson said she is alert and recovering. We will stay on top of both of these breaking news events to give you updates as soon as we get them. New developments, a 3-judge panel on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments this afternoon for and against a federal judge's decision to block President Trump's use of the California National Guard on the streets of L.A. No decision has been made, but some experts do say the panel seemed skeptical of California's arguments. The mandatory curfew in downtown L.A. is now over. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass imposed the curfew last week while demonstrators were engaging with state and federal law enforcement. The city council met today about extending that curfew, but was concerned how the curfew impacts local businesses. NYC Comptroller and mayoral candidate Brad Lander arrested by ICE agents earlier today. Look at this. Lander's office saying he was escorting a defendant out of immigration court when masked ICE agents detained him. One video on X shows Lander saying, "I'm not obstructing," while being put in handcuffs. Other videos show Lander arm in arm with that defendant and refused to allow ICE agents to take that individual into custody. custody. It's unclear if Lander will face any charges. One of 4 escaped ICE detainees remains at large. The FBI is searching for Andres Felipe Pineda Mogollon, a non-legal resident who overstayed a travel visa and who was arrested twice this year, once for petty larceny and then for residential burglary. He escaped the Delaney Hall ICE Detention Center last Thursday with 3 others who have now all been taken back into custody. There was a $25,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is investigating 33 possible non-citizens who are accused of having voted in last year's general election. It comes after Texas gained access to a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service database. An executive order from President Trump directed DHS to offer the database to all states for free to preserve election integrity. Tonight, the Food and Drug Administration announces sweeping changes to the review process for drug developers in this country. It could cut down the time from 10 to 12 months to just 1. Our Christine Frizzell sat down with a new FDA commissioner and brings us the details of the new program.
It's a pilot program that could drastically change the way prescription drugs reach the public. The Food and Drug Administration announcing vouchers will now be given to drug companies that change their methods, streamlining the review process, which can take up to a year to 1 month.
So by taking that review time down to 1 month, we think that has significant incentives for a company to play ball with our national priorities.
Those new national priorities? Increasing domestic drug manufacturing, addressing affordability of drugs in the United States, and doing more to meet public health needs.
So in other words, these companies that are kind of working to try to help make some drugs a little cheaper, they're going to get rewarded.
We'd like to reward good behavior in the marketplace. 1 month turnaround time for a final drug application is worth well over $100 million in market value.
Are there concerns, though, that by going from 12 months to 1 month for the review process, that it will compromise the safety of these drugs?
We've done everything humanly possible to make sure we're still doing the same scientific review, but in a much more efficient way. Hey, how are you?
Dr. Marty McCary, now FDA commissioner, previously spent 2 decades at Johns Hopkins, where he specialized in pancreatic surgery and public policy research. He insists the new voucher program is about cutting red tape, using artificial intelligence to more rapidly go through lengthy documents, and making FDA review personnel more accessible, something those inside the agency say will be more difficult given the more than 3,000 jobs recently cut, several of which Dr. McCary told me he's since brought back, though he stands firm on the new direction he hopes to take the agency.
The FDA is not supposed to be your doctor, and it's not our job to censor Americans. So we're getting back to our core mission of reviewing products and making determinations of what's safe and effective.
Now, despite these assurances of safety, I can tell you many people working inside the agency are very concerned the review process and these changes will amount to cutting corners and could jeopardize the ultimate safety and effectiveness of future drugs. They say already so many of the most valuable employees with decades of institutional knowledge are no longer at the FDA. There are concerns about the agency's future.
Will any drug company, Christine, that wants to be considered for these new vouchers, will they be eligible?
From what I understand, there will be a limited number of vouchers given. Dr. McCary was pretty adamant. He thinks some of these processes, which could involve life-saving drugs, are just taking too long. Sometimes as companies are waiting weeks or months to get a phone call returned from the FDA or waiting for paperwork that could have been completed sooner. Dee Dee?
Live from Washington, D.C., Christine Frizzell, thank you. The high-profile trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs could be getting close to wrapping up. The prosecution told the court today they may be ready to rest by tomorrow. They have at least one more summary witness to call, but might be it. Then the defense said their case might only be 2 to 5 days. One attorney said it might be shorter than 2. If that is accurate on both accounts, jury deliberations could be next week. Former U.S. Senator Bob Menendez is now in prison, serving his 11-year federal prison sentence. Menendez was convicted last year of accepting bribes from Egyptian businessmen. Last week, a federal appeals court rejected his attempt to stay free on bail while while appealing his conviction. Nadine Menendez, Bob Menendez's wife, awaits her sentence after also being convicted in the bribery scheme. Coming up next here on the National News Desk, tornadoes and large hail could hit multiple states tonight. We're bringing you the very latest forecast. And then the brands of B vitamins being recalled because they could be dangerous for people with allergies. And the new effort to stop thieves from stealing guns from cars, a crime that's on the rise in 90 seconds. Right now, over 70 million Americans are at risk for severe thunderstorms this evening. Damaging winds, large hail and tornadoes are forecast in parts of the central and southern plains, also southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma. They are at highest risk right now for destructive wind gusts up to 100 miles per hour, and over 20 million people are under flood watches. That includes in West Virginia, already hit hard by unprecedented flooding in the past few days. The death toll in that state is now up to 7 people, with 1 or 2 people still unaccounted for, according to officials. Crews continue to search throughout the Ohio Valley. Around 20 cars have been recovered from waterways and multiple roads remain closed. Members of Congress received a security briefing today in light of the shootings of 2 Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses outside Minneapolis that authorities say were politically motivated. There are renewed calls for increased security for lawmakers and for lawmakers themselves to tone down their rhetoric. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports from Capitol Hill.
Suspected Minnesota assassin Vance Luther Bolter is behind bars, and for some members of Congress, the chilling reality is setting in that their names were on a list authorities say they found in his SUV, like Democratic Congresswoman Hillary Scholten of Michigan.
I got the call Sunday night, of course, while the shooter was still at large.
Immediately after the attacks, Democratic leadership requested Capitol Police provide extra security for Minnesota's congressional delegation.
We are seeing a dramatic increase in threats against senators, congressmen, public officials.
It was just Monday a man in Georgia was indicted for allegedly threatening sexual violence against Republican Senators Deb Fischer and Ted Cruz and Cruz's family. In the past year, there were 2 attempted assassinations of then-candidate Trump and an arson attack at the residence of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Usually, a president calls a governor after a tragedy in their state. President Trump issued a statement condemning the violence in Minnesota, but says calling Governor Tim Walz, also a former Democratic vice presidential nominee, would be a waste of time.
I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out, I'm not calling.
Hours after the attacks, Senator Mike Lee posted claims on X that the suspect was a Marxist, implying Democrats were to blame for what happened. The suspect's roommate later told reporters he was a Trump supporter. Minnesota Senator Tina Smith, a friend of slain state representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, confronted Lee about this Monday.
He has a powerful platform. He should not be using it to spread misinformation and to basically make a joke of the murder of people.
Leaders on Capitol Hill are looking at increasing funding for Capitol Police, which is requesting an additional $176 million for 2026, which would bring their budget to almost $1 billion. Capitol Police say in 2024 alone, they investigated over 9,400 concerning statements and direct threats against members of Congress, their families, and staff, up from 8,000 the year before. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Americans are pulling back on spending, according to a new government report. Sales at retail sales and restaurants fell 0.9% in May, following a smaller drop of 0.1% in April. This could be because people rushed to buy big-ticket items in early spring to try to get ahead of tariffs. That drove retail sales up in March and down since then. The 75-day pause on the law that would ban the app in the U.S., TikTok, because of national security concerns, could get another extension. The current deadline ends this Thursday. Trump has previously said that a deal could be made as part of tariff negotiations with China. On Air Force One, the president said an extension to get a deal done is likely.
Probably, yeah. Probably have to get China approval. I think we'll get it.
Yeah, the legal basis.
I think President Xi will ultimately approve it.
Kraft Heinz says it will stop using artificial food coloring by the end of 2027, becoming the first major food manufacturer to officially announce plans to do so. Kool-Aid, Jell-O, Crystal Light, and other brands will change their ingredients. In April, HHS Secretary Kennedy said food companies had informally agreed to remove chemical dyes by 2026. Several vitamin gummies are recalled due to an undeclared allergen. Vita Warehouse Corporation recalled B12 vitamins under brand names Berkeley Jensen, Welby, and Vita Globe. They were sold at Aldi, BJ's Wholesale Club, and online with an expiration date of October 2026. The FDA says the vitamins might contain peanuts. Consumers should return them for a refund or throw them out. More than 150 million Americans are drinking water contaminated with toxic forever chemicals. Last year, after decades of inaction, the EPA set limits to protect public health. But now, that same agency is undoing those defenses. Spotlight on America's national correspondent Lisa Fletcher investigates why.
Every time we look at these chemicals, we discover that they are more toxic than we had previously thought.
Some protections designed to save lives from a dangerous class of chemicals in drinking water are being shut off.
This is something that the chemical industry has asked for. This is something that the water utilities have asked for.
But it's something Melanie Benish never wanted to see. She spent years protecting Americans from PFAS chemicals as part of her role at the Environmental Working Group. Linked to developmental issues in kids, cancer, and reproductive harm, these toxic forever chemicals contaminate the water supply from industrial releases, landfills, and firefighting foam.
There was a strong scientific basis for restricting these.
Last year, the EPA set strict limits on some of these chemicals, including the most prevalent PFOA and PFOS. EPA estimated the move would prevent 9,600 deaths and 30,000 illnesses. Now, 4 of those limits are being rescinded under the new EPA, among them PFHXS, which faced one of the strictest standards.
It's a dangerous chemical, and it's a pretty widespread chemical. We found it in a lot of drinking water sources.
We found it too. In 2022, we tested tap water from homes to the halls of Congress, even the EPA offices themselves. We found PFHXS in residential taps, disturbing to Linda Birnbaum, the former director of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences.
There are growing amounts of animal and human data showing that PFHXS may be every bit as bad as, say, PFOS and PFOA, and it lasts in our bodies for a longer period of time.
PFHXS will now be unregulated in drinking water, along with another PFAS chemical, Gen X. It's infamous in North Carolina, where PFAS manufacturers dumped it into the Cape Fear River for years.
Did it ever occur to you that that water might be contaminated?
Never. Not in a million years.
Beth Marcassino believes Gen X is the reason her son died shortly after birth, failing to develop a kidney or bladder, problems that some studies have linked to PFAS exposure.
Here I am today. I should have never have ever questioned that my water was the source that killed my son.
The EPA said it is rescinding rules for Gen X, PFHXS, and 2 other PFAS chemicals to ensure that the determinations follow the legal process laid out in the Safe Drinking Water Act. We asked the EPA why it didn't leave the rules in place to protect health while it examines the regulatory process. The EPA did not respond.
It is the Environmental Protection Agency. It is not the Chemical Industry Support Agency. It is not the Water Utility Accommodation Agency. It is the Environmental Protection Agency. And so at the forefront of everything that the EPA should do should be protection of the environment, protection of public health.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
And it is worth noting that the EPA is keeping limits on the 2 major PFAS chemicals. The new administrator of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, was very outspoken about PFAS contamination when he was a U.S. representative and actually founded a congressional task force on this very issue. Spotlight on America asked to speak with him, but his office declined. To see how the EPA responded to Spotlight on America's specific questions, go to spotlightinvestigates.com. Coming up here, the new security measures the city of Austin is adding in response to a surge in crime on buses. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. And we begin in Washington after police rescued a girl kidnapped by a complete stranger.
The suspect in this case was booked into the Pierce County Jail on a warrant unrelated to the missing child, but then released. Tacoma police quickly found him and that missing 2-year-old because so many people in the community acted right away.
It was seriously one of the, a best case scenario where we had all the footage.
The girl's mother reported her missing around 9:30. A short time later, an employee at the Wendy's restaurant on South Prospect Street called police to report a man in the store who said he found the child and was trying to locate her parents. When the suspect heard that police were coming to help, that employee said he took the child and left in a silver sedan. In this case, police had surveillance from the restaurant and the public calling in many tips after they read the Amber Alerts. One of those callers provided the key bit of information that led police right to the man's house, where officers found him and the missing girl.
Ellis Travis now always makes sure his car is locked when he walks away after crooks recently broke into his vehicle to steal electrical equipment.
The equipment that they have taken, I use. So replacing that's the only big thing that bothers me.
Equipment, not the only stuff thieves are targeting.
Oftentimes, people leave their guns and their vehicle unsecured, the car gets broken into, the gun gets stolen, it gets on the street, and it gets used in other crimes.
Over the past 2 years, Columbus police say 922 firearms have been stolen from cars. This year alone, at least 180 guns have been taken.
I believe in the right to own a gun, but there is a responsibility that comes with that.
Take the gun with you, properly secure it wherever it is that you're going.
Being a female riding the buses, it's a little scary.
Bonnie Cudlip rides the bus 3 to 4 times a day. She hasn't seen any of the new transit police officers today, but says their presence on buses, at stations, and along key corridors is both wanted and needed.
Sometimes I take the bus as early as 5 o'clock in the morning and it's dark. So I'm in a very dangerous position. So law enforcement being present, specifically in areas where there's higher traffic, definitely.
What we want to do is make sure we get our officers out there in the field, have a visible presence so people can see them.
The goal is to put officers at high traffic areas such as Republic Square to reduce crime and other issues.
We're going to have a small amount of officers starting off, so we're going to have to be very, very strategic. We can't be on every corner, on every bus, but we will do everything we can to respond as fast and as appropriately as possible.
Coming up next, a preview of tonight's 2025 NHL Stanley Cup Final. We'll have that right after this. The puck drops at 8 p.m. tonight outside of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as the Florida Panthers seek to close out the NHL Stanley Cup Final over the Edmonton Oilers. In a series for the history books, the Panthers lead 3-2. 3 games have been decided in overtime. These two teams played last year for the Cup, so it would be interesting to see who pans out on top. That's going to do it for us for this edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. See you tonight at 10.